What's up, meta nerds? This video is going to be a complete breakdown of the watery world of Mon Cala, also known as Dak. This planet has a ton of awesome details in both canon and legends, many of which are the same, but when they're exclusive I will have a canon or legend sign on the screen if you care about that distinction. This is one of the most fascinating planets in the galaxy, with some of the strangest plant and animal life, really weird locations, and a deep and rich history. So let's jump into it. We should point out that the Quarren in their Quarrenese language, and in the eponymous Mon Calamari language, both refer to this planet as Dak, but the Mon Calamari were a more technologically advanced species than the Quarren, having already spread out and studied a few of their nearest celestial bodies by the time the human representatives of the Republic made first contact. That was way back in the year 4166 BBY. Because these were the people they met with, the planet was named after them in the Republic's database. The name stuck from then on out, but I will use both names throughout the video. This world was located at coordinates U6 on the galactic map, being in the Outer Rim territories in the Calamari sector within the Mon Calamari system, which was a binary star system with 8 orbits. The first planet was Maul, a barren, rocky planetoid with no moons. Dak was number 2 with 1 moon, that was much like our moon here on Earth. At the third position was the uncreatively named Iceberg 1, which was simply a large ball of ice. But it too had a moon. Fourth orbit was Iceberg 2, followed by Mon Cala. This world was one of those that the Calamari had discovered and eventually terraformed to act as a colony. That world had 2 moons, while it was followed by the gas giant Sep Elopon and its 32 moons. Not much could be done here except for mine the gases, and it is unknown if any of those moons were ever utilized. And in the last 2 orbits are Iceberg 3 and 4. Though there is constant debate amongst both Republic and Calamari astronomers stating that both of those icebergs should really be considered comets that were just captured by the binary stars. Now that we know about its celestial neighborhood, let's head down to Mon Cala itself. With a diameter of 11,030 kilometers or 6,854 miles, it was just a bit smaller than Earth and more than twice the size of Mustafar. Its rotation period, or day, and orbital period, or year, were also similar to Earth, at 21-hour days and 398 days in a year. The atmosphere was Type 1, which was breathable for most species, and had moderate temperatures as well as standard gravity. Almost the entire surface was covered in water, but there were some locations that poked up above the waves. While the Quarren evolved in the deepest parts of the oceans, the Mon Calamari grew up in the water but would also go up on land. This amphibious nature is what saved the species early on, when the Quarren attacks nearly made the Calamari go extinct. But the ability to regroup and take refuge on these islands, while also use this as a place to manufacture weapons, allowed them to turn the tide of this early tribal warfare, to the point that the Quarrens were the ones that were almost extinct. While these bits of landmass are so few and far between, this advantage set them on course to technological dominance over their underwater neighbors for the rest of history. Eventually these islands would be expanded, along with adding completely artificial island cities. The capital, Mon Cala City, would remain underwater, but there were major sites like Dak City and New Coral City that were above water and acted as major ports. While many, like Bell City, would have major sections both above and below the water, acting like a comfy place to live for the natives, with short transit times to the busy hubs visited by offworlders. Tarkin once said, quote, "Mon Cala is a valuable world in many ways, its people, technology, and civilization. Why, Emperor Palpatine himself enjoys the Mon Calamari aquatic ballet." That was the show going on while Palpatine told Anakin the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and there were several of these performing arts centers spread across Mon Cala. The Mon Caladrome was an enormous and incredibly elegant opera house that rose out just above the surface to allow easy access to off-world visitors. While there were also resort cities like those of Crystal Reef, so called because it was situated near the icebergs of the Northern Pole. This playground had numerous gambling facilities, and would end up hosting some criminal organizations like Black Sun. And there were even pod racer courses at Orotoro Ga'am, and at the nearby Grand Reefs. And so there was tons of entertainment both on-world and as cultural exports. But at the end of the day, the major exports were still seafood, and the high-tech equipment for starships and weapons. While the imports were the diverse foods and medicines that could be acquired from a galaxy-spanning economy. Also taking in some valuable tech as well, with things like hyperdrives being the miracle of space travel that opened the world up to endless opportunities. But the Mon Calamari made shields that were considered one of the best credits could buy, so you can see why it was so crucial to the Republic. By the time of the Clone Wars, the population of Dak was 27.5 billion, with 49% Quarren, 46% Mon Calamari, a surprisingly high 4% human, and 1% listed as other. One of the most interesting other were the whalodons. These are a sentient whale-like species that never developed any technology, but which could intelligently communicate with others via their sing-song language. Early on in the Mon Calamari rule over this planet, they had outlawed any hunting of the whalodon. But later when the Empire took over, they saw these majestic creatures simply as a great source of protein, setting up processing centers and flying in hordes of Aqualish to hunt them down and chop them up. But their entire history before that was really peaceful, with cities like Aquarius being built so that they could interact with other species, including offworlders. Aquarius being an enormous oxygen bubble dome city, providing for an incredible experience for O2 breathing visitors, who could walk around on the ocean floor without any dive suits, and some would even learn to speak with these enormous intelligent creatures. There was also a ton of other plant and wildlife in this watery world, and this is where things get really weird. I truly believe that Mon Cala has some of the most insane, complex, and just overall interesting life in the entire galaxy. You'll see that a lot of them focus on their telepathic ability. Starting off is the Amphihydrus, a simple looking frog that has the interesting ability of mind control, and these things are considered force sensitive. Just think about how many sapient species out there in the galaxy, like humans, only have a tiny fraction of their population that are force sensitive, whereas this entire frog species can use telepathy to control their prey. Studies have shown that they were exclusively utilizing the dark side of the force. This once became a planet-wide emergency with the boom of off-world trade, as things like rancors were being imported to Dak. The Amphihydrus essentially launched numerous terrorist attacks across major cities, making the rancors and similar large beasts go on killing sprees, to the point that the Empire had to step in and launch a war on these frogs. They tried to make them go extinct, but there are still traces of small communities of these darksider amphibians across the world. And an interesting thing to consider, though not directly addressed by the lore, is if they can control sapient offworlders. It doesn't seem like the native larger beings like the Quarren, Calamari, or Whalodons were ever affected by them, perhaps due to some natural defenses against psychic attacks that we would expect to naturally arrive when you develop on a world with so many telepathic creatures. But most species of offworlders would likely have no defenses, so let me know what you think about this in the comments. Blobfish were more simple creatures that live in the sea trees, and would travel through the kelp forest in swarms of thousands. Their main threat was the blossoming gulper, which had limbs that resembled the sea tree, using these as a lure while it burrowed itself into the sandy sea floor. These sands were also the home to coral worms, which were considered a delicacy by several different species, while cubicle worms were a threat to the pod racers on the Grand Reefs. The Dak anchovy was loved across the galaxy, but some, like the famous chef Dexter Jetster, had a dangerous allergy to these and Mon Calamari. Cowl were crab-like creatures whose shells were so strong that they were used by the Mon Calamari Knights as a shield. The devil squid was one of the most fearsome creatures under the seas, dominating the deepest regions of Dak called the Devil's Crevasse. At around 10 meters or 33 feet, these things were used as war squids by Imperial Knight Tree Sind in 137 ABY. He used the Force to control several of them in his fight against the even more powerful Sea Leviathan, a creature that was not a natural life form native to Dak, but a Sith spawn, an alchemically engineered horror. The Great Ungnis Trench was one of the largest trenches on Mon Cala, and which also housed some of this world's most terrifying creatures, the as yet unnamed giant squid-like monstrosity that once attacked Darth Vader. While the Krakana was like a shark but with numerous spiked appendages, and even more feared than the larger monstrosities just mentioned. Because while you are unlikely to ever encounter one of those giant squids, this creature was known to roam throughout the entire planet, snatching up natives and intensely feared by offworlders. It was related to the larger Keelkana, which were used as mounts by the Calamari Knights. While a type of crustacean called the Titan Cantre was used for its armor, its skin being tough yet pliable to make this protective suit. The Lee Rome was a type of clam that was used to hold the crown of the monarch of the Mon Calamari, and then there was the Mon Cala eel that was harnessed as a torture device on prisoners, as well as the scarier Chorn, an eel that would often resort to cannibalism and was considered a delicacy by the Quarrens, and by no one else. Flailers were leech-like creatures that would suck your blood, and of course there were countless types of fish, many of which were kept as pets, with calamari debating as to which ones were the smartest, much like many dog breeds here on Earth. The organic gill was a bioengineered species. It naturally converted water into oxygen, and with some tweaking they could be mass-grown and altered to sell as a face mask for offworlders, acting as a more efficient and environmentally friendly form of diving gear. Trumpetweed was a plant that when fossilized was seen as a beautiful piece of natural art by many species. Quarren Senator Tikes gave some of these to the Naboo Senator Palpatine, even including enormous pearls to set up on top. And one tourist attraction was that once a year, billions of single-celled algae bloomed, causing a green stripe across the equator of the planet. But the last two creatures I want to mention are the most noteworthy telepaths. The Moapa were a telepathic species that would normally float through the seas as individuals, but could physically link for both offense and defense, which also turned them from mindless organisms into a great collective intelligence. During the Clone Wars, they would align with the Quarren Isolation League, and one grouping even attacked Kit Fisto. Once he learned how intelligent this race could be, he ordered that the Calamari send diplomats, initiating talks that would eventually lead with a treaty with this unique species. But the strangest organism has to be the Knowledge Bank. In canon, they are simply known as the Intelligent Mollusk, and Senator Tikes had at least one of them relocated to a pool inside of his office, located in the Senate building. They are sapient, bivalve mollusks found deep on the ocean floor. Their telepathic abilities are so powerful that the bank collectively forms a sort of computer archive, recording the thoughts of all life on Mon Cala, using the oceans as a giant connected medium, and controlling the minds of many fish species, acting as sorts of Wi-Fi extenders across the globe. Relays that would spread their telepathic ability so that they could collect the thoughts of everything throughout the years, developing a complete history of the planet through the eyes of each that lived it. When off-worlders came to visit, it would read their minds as well, developing a deep understanding of the galaxy at large. When Leia met with them, she reasoned that they must have a connection with the Force. And unlike those evil frogs, they seemed to be aligned with the light, reading the intentions of those who sought their wisdom, and only aiding enlightened Mon Calamari and Quarren, who would request knowledge through a complex religious ritual. While the minds of the off-worlders were unknowingly examined via the clam's fish spies, Leia is thought to be the only human to ever actually meet with the Knowledge Bank, and many of the native population had no clue where these mythological beings were, making me think that Senator Tikes' display on Coruscant had to be seen as either an outrageously offensive action, or the complete opposite, that the Knowledge Bank requested to have a member moved to the capital of the galaxy. What better place to collect even more information? And we can end the list of species with one mysterious artificial creature. One day over the seas near Foam Wander City, a strange metallic craft appeared, and suddenly dropped a device into the ocean. Soon after, nearby fishermen started hauling up 1.5 meter wide droids they called nanostars. It would move through a series of flexible screw appendages, and zap anything that came to investigate it. Their purpose and origin remain as one of the most confusing mysteries in the entire galaxy. So again, let me know what you think about them in the comments. As for its history, I already mentioned how the Mon Calamari's tech allowed them to become the dominant species on Dak. And though their government would change over the millennia, even at the time of the Clone Wars it was still a monarchy with a representative council. It was also an inherited throne, and this was a constant source of tension with the Quarren. Dooku had their king Yos Kulina assassinated, and pushed Quarren chieftain No Sarai to secede, dragging the entire planet into civil war. As soon as the Empire came to power, this was one of their first targets, mostly for the reasons Tarkin mentioned earlier, that if these fish folk denied the Emperor, it would be inspiring to many, and their tech would provide enormous military aid to any rebels. The siege of this world was intense, but the Mon Calamari were able to convert some of their cities into enormous starships, breaking through the blockade and fulfilling one of the Emperor's worst nightmares, as the Mon Cala fleets and expertise were the single largest addition to the Rebel Alliance. Later, they would find Imperial records that confirmed a fear that Luke Skywalker had experienced in a dream state, showing that just like his vision, after Alderaan, Mon Cala was sent to be destroyed by the first Death Star, and the first target of the second Death Star was this watery world. Later, during the rise of the First Order, history would repeat itself. This time it would be No Sarai's advisor, Guy, who wanted the Quarren to become the rulers of Dak, secretly contacting the First Order and reporting on the ships that were being made for the New Republic. General Hux would personally lead the attack, but we can assume that this was a Resistance victory. Now in the Legends timeline, the Mon Calamari and Quarren were able to drive off their Imperial overlords, these two species dedicating everything to the Alliance, and their shipyards would undergo continuous expansion and upgrades for over a century. They would be crucial to the defeat of the extragalactic invaders the Yuuzhan Vong, and the many Imperial remnant groups that rose up over the years. By the year 137 ABY, Mon Cala's orbital shipyard was larger than that of Kuat Drive Yards, the once undisputed King shipwright. But during the Second Imperial Civil War, this planet was again captured by the Empire. In an Alliance fleet counterattack, 1/3 of the shipyard was destroyed, and the Sith scientist Vol'aisin unleashed a poison that would spread throughout the entire watery world, an attempt by this new empire to eliminate the threats from Dak once and for all. The Alliance was only able to evacuate 20% of the 27 billion population of sapient creatures, like the Mon Calamari, Quarren, Whalodons, and Moappa, while all of the planet and animal life left behind was killed. Besides any of them that might be in captivity off-world, they were now completely extinct, including the Knowledge Bank. And this fate of Mon Cala was never reversed. Many of the survivors were transported to live inside of the orbital shipyard, but that's how it was left in Legends. The sad ending to one of the most vibrant, interesting, and important worlds in the entire galaxy. So that's it for Dak or Mon Cala, but you definitely want to hear the cool facts and behind the scenes stuff. The very first mention of this planet was in the 1982 issue of Bantha Tracks, where they gave readers a preview of the Mon Calamari species, saying that they hailed from the planet Dak. Their home would later be called Calamari, Mon Calamari, Mon's Calamari, and Mon Cala in various media over the decades. And the name Dak was for a time so obscure that people debated if it was canon. It wasn't until the RPG guide Geonosis and the Outer Rim Worlds brought it back, and then it would be called that in various other media throughout the years. The water world would go on to become one of the most depicted planets in Star Wars media, perhaps the most of any world that was not in the films. Speaking of which, and this might really upset you, but that canon comic I mentioned where the First Order is assembling over Mon Cala simply ends and says continued in the Rise of Skywalker. This battle was not concluded in any other material, so I have to guess that this was just another storyline that was abandoned in the new trilogy. To think we could have not only seen this world in a film, but a major space battle between one of the New Republic's greatest shipwrights. Don't think about it too long. This world has also appeared in a ton of video games and comics, and a lot of the details come from there, but mostly the Essential Atlas, the Guide to Warfare, and Ultimate Star Wars. If you want to pick those up or other Star Wars merch, as well as free audiobooks, be sure to check out the links in the description. Hit the like button if you liked it, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. You can also check out ways to support this channel for free, or see our Patreon and PayPal. Just $1 will get your name on this list, but special shout out to our $25 tier, Chris Garcia, Andrew Ban, Seraph Diaz, Cas Costello, and Carlos Velez. But most important of all, remember, everyone's gangster till the fish start turning their cities into starships, and the Force will be with you, always.